What's going on, guys? So, I've been away from YouTube for a long time, too long actually, and I've now got a little bit of free time, and my work schedule has changed enough to where I'm able to start doing regular content again. So, I decided, I'm really going to get back into the habit of this, and I thought for a comeback video, if you will, a good thing that I could share is instead of stories from you guys or stories that have been shared by you guys, I could do s- different things that have happened to me and in my family's life that are related to the paranormal. And that way you just kind of get a mindset of the different things that, you know, as I was a child, the different stories that my parents and family members would tell me, and then the things that I experienced that really made me love the paranormal. So, just to kind of give you a setting, where I lived and where I was raised was in a very rural area in Knott County, Kentucky. Now, this little place, this little community was called Topmost, or many referred to it as Beaver Creek. It was very rural, and in fact, until a few years ago, the only stores that we had was mom and pop businesses. And the only store that we have now that isn't a mom and pop store is a Family Dollar. So it's very rural, off to itself, and you kind of go back in time 20 years when you're here. It's very crazy, and it's a beautiful place. Um, but the first story that I'm going to tell you actually takes place in the 60s. So we're talking about a place that today is very rural. So you can imagine 50 plus years ago how rural this area was. And it really taught me that everything that I'd understood or read about the paranormal up until this point wasn't necessarily true, because not all paranormal events that happen in your life are necessarily going to be bad or evil. There can be some good things that happen, and this is one of them. Now, my aunt, she was 9 or 10 at the time, and her brothers and sisters were much older. They were in their teens. So, my aunt would oftentimes find herself playing by herself, running around the house and things like that, which she was doing on this day when this occurred. Now, it was just like any other day; nothing strange had happened or anything like that. My aunt was just out running around the house, and she had actually turned the back corner, going down the side yard of my grandmother's house. And at the bottom, because it went down a little hill, and at the very bottom of this hill, leading under the house, there was a doorway that led under the house where, my grandmother would store, potatoes and things like that over the winter. And she said that my aunt said that she saw a figure of a man standing at the bottom of this hill right out from this doorway. And she was frightened. She turned around, she ran back in the house. She told my grandmother, and my grandmother actually sent out one of her brothers to see what it was that my aunt had saw. Now, when her brother got out to where she said this occurred, he saw nothing. So he decided he would go on around the front of the house. And as he turned the corner to go into the front yard, on the ground laid a rattlesnake. He killed the rattlesnake and threw the rattlesnake over in the creek, and came back in and told my grandmother and my aunt what had happened, what he found. And my aunt truly believes, and I truly believe this too, that whatever she saw that day saved her life. Because had she gotten bit by this rattlesnake, the the chances of them being able to get her to a hospital in under, in the little time that she would have had to survive this snake bite, it would have been very unlikely. So this apparition that she saw saved her life. Now, one of the other things I'm going to tell you about is it's something that actually happened to my mother and my father. Now, it's not anything very crazy, but it's one of those things that you just can't explain. Now, when I was very, very young, maybe two or three, my mother and father had went to stay at a friend's place, and of course, I was there too. We were all in the bedroom getting ready to lay down when my mother and father heard the drawers in the kitchen opening and closing and heard the silverware moving around. My father immediately went to check what was going on to see, what was causing the commotion, and he found nothing. There was absolutely nothing there. The doors were locked, the windows were locked, no one was in any of the other rooms, and they were the only people in this house. So they have no idea what made this noise and what was opening and closing these drawers and moving the silverware around. So that was one of the strange things that's happened to my parents. Now, there have been other little things. My dad was in Vietnam and he had told me some things that he had saw there, but it's one of those things where I was at the age where I can't really remember all of the details. So I don't really want to try to retell those stories because I'm likely going to get it very wrong. But I would like to tell you about a couple of things that happened to me when I was young, and even one thing that happened after I was an adult and living on my own. Now, when I was a young kid, maybe 8 or 9, I was actually living at my grandmother's house. And to kind of give you an idea, my grandmother lived up up a one lane road that was that what we call here, we call it a holler or a hollow. And it's basically a little one lane road that has mountains very close on either side of it. And where my grandmother lived, if you went out the back door of her home and stepped off of the porch and looked across the road, there was this old house that had been sitting there. No one lived in this house, and in fact, I don't remember a time when anyone did live in this house. Now, the thing about this house was I actually up until the age of 8 or 9, whenever this first thing that happened to me, until that actually occurred, I stayed in the front yard of this house because the way the house actually was, there was a very long driveway, and the driveway actually led up the mountain that was beside the house because there was an old coal mine that was up at the very top of this mountain. So you could take that little trail and go up around the mountain to where this coal mine once was. Now, when you're on the path leading up to the house, that's actually when you go across the front door of the house. If you're on the one lane road that's leading up, up the holler, you're actually looking at the side of the house. So one day, and this would have been in the summer because I was not in school. It was very warm, and it was the middle of the day, so it wasn't like it was, later in the evening or at night or anything like that when this occurred. This was the middle of the day, and I remember I was just riding my bicycle in front of it like I did 1,000 times before. But I just remember on this one pass, when I went by the front door of this house, I just got this feeling of being afraid, very, very afraid. And at the time, I had no idea what it was coming from. I was trying to figure out why I was feeling this way, and I couldn't. So I just went home and, called it a day at that point. I did not want to have anything else to do with this area that I was in because I was just terrified. Now, a maybe 6 to 8 months after this, it was not very long after, we started to notice another thing about this house, and whenever you would go past the front door, a doorbell would ring. Now, this house, it hasn't had power in many years, and to look at the house, you would never there was not even a doorbell on it. So I'm not sure why this sound was coming from this house. But my dad was the first person to hear it because where my grandmother lived, if it was during the weekend and my uncles and aunts were visiting my grandmother had maybe enough area in her driveway to park maybe 3 cars. So my dad would actually park his car in the actual driveway of this house. And it was one day that he was getting ready to take my mom somewhere, and he was going up to turn around to come back, to get my mother. And as he was going up, he heard the doorbell ring. Now, that was the first instance, and he just kind of shrugged it off. But not long after that, and I'm talking not even a month after this, we were all walking, because at this point it was early spring, and we were all walking, getting, just getting out because of the winter and everything. And we were walking along the front of this house when we all heard the doorbell. Now I'm talking, this was me, my mom, my dad, and my aunt. We all heard this doorbell ring clear as day. So we all heard it. So it was one of those things, it wasn't anyone's imagination because no one had said anything about it. And up until that point, Dad had never said anything about the experience that he had the first time that he heard the doorbell. So at that point, we all just kind of, just turned around, went back to my grandmother's, and we just kind of, just left it at that. It was one of those things to where I was more than happy that they weren't talking about it because the feelings that I was getting, the terror and the just the sheer, you know, the fact that I was just so afraid of, the thought that this house was whatever it was. And at the time, I would not have even used the word haunted. I just thought that there was this evil person that lived there that never came out in the sunlight or anything like that. And it was horrifying to me. But after a couple of years, we hadn't really heard anything with the doorbell or anything like that. And I was a little bit older. And, at this time, I was getting a little bit more brave as well. So my aunt and my parents and me, we decided, hey, let's go into this house. Let's see what's in this house. And of course, we knew the family that owned it. We had a key to get in and everything, so it wasn't a big deal. So we decided to go over and we went in the house. Now, when you first walked into the house, it was just like any other house. I mean, it was a house that hadn't been lived in years. Maybe at that point, it may have even been decades, but no one had lived there. And I remember my aunt came to this, it was either a cupboard or a cabinet, and she opened the door. Now, when she opened the door, it looked like she was opening the door to a stove or something like that. There was this intense bright light, but there was no heat with it. It was just the light. And I remember looking at it and then, you know, looking around and noticing that I was the only one that was reacting to this. So when I asked them if they noticed that, and they all focused on what I was looking at, and I saw that, you know, there was no reaction from them, I just shrugged it off as, it's just my imagination, the things that have happened here in the past. It's playing, a tricks on my mind. And I just shrugged it off and, just went with it. Now, the strangest thing that happened to me at this house, or I wasn't really at the house. It actually happened. It was a fall evening. Me and my cousin, we had actually just gotten back from basketball practice. and my uncle had went in to visit the family because he had brought me home. So me and my cousin, we just kind of hung out outside. We were actually at the edge of my grandmother's driveway, and it basically, if you looked right across the street, you could have saw the house. And the way that my cousin was facing is he had his back to the house, but he was aiming more toward up the road from the house. So as I was looking, I decided to look up, and I don't know what made me look up at this point, because I've never even paid attention to this area, this house before. But I looked up, and when I looked up, I saw in the very back window on the top story of the house, there was this figure that had a black robe, and its face was red and its eyes and nose was black. Now, I remember just asking my cousin if he saw that too, and it was one of the scariest things that had happened to either of us. We both just turned and we ran into the house, and after that we did not hang out there anymore after dark. We just no, too scary. We just would not do it. Now, the actual house ended up getting tore down a few years after this, and there's actually a new home sitting on it now, and to my knowledge, nothing crazy has happened there. But those strange things that had happened while this house was there are just some of the things that as a young child I cannot explain even now as an adult. No matter how much I try to explain them, I just cannot do it. Was it my mind playing tricks on me? Possibly. But I know that that doorbell happened because we all reacted to it. So the other things, it could have just been where I was a child. It was a scary house, you know, and I just got scared, and my mind played tricks on me. That's a very good possibility. Now this last thing, however, this is the thing that I cannot explain because up until this point, I had never experienced sleep paralysis. I never had any issues like that whatsoever, but it happened to me three times during the same summer, and each time got a little bit worse. And it got a little bit more, terrifying as it occurred. Now, the first time, you know, it happened, in all honesty, I thought it was maybe just a dream. I just remember waking up, looking around, not really being able to move. I tried to get up, I was unable to, so I tried to look around. The only thing I could move was my eyes, but I could not look around the room. And then after maybe 10, 15 minutes of this, it was over. I was able to look around again. I was able to, move. I rolled over in bed, went back to sleep, just played it off as a dream. The second time that it happened, I made note though, because I remember that not even a few weeks earlier, this same thing had happened to me. And I remember trying with everything in me to just get up and move. And I remember I was able to look down far enough to see my dog. Now, my dog had absolutely no reaction. Typically, when I woke up, she would react. She would come to me, she would lick my face, and do typical things that your dog would do when you first wake up in the morning or whatever. In this case, it was the middle of the night. She did none of that. There was no reaction from her. She was just laying there asleep. Now, I just chalked this up as, I was just, I wasn't moving. I wasn't able to move. So therefore, she had no idea that I was awake. But the third time that it happened, this is this was the time that it was the scariest for sure. Because I remember waking up, and to give you a layout of my room, if you look to the right, there is a window that leads into my front yard. And then behind me to my left, there was a window that led into my side yard. Now, I woke up to the sound of something pecking at the window that was to the left and behind me. So automatically, my first thing was to turn and look at whatever this was that was pecking on my window. But in order for me to do that, I would have had to have lifted my arm up and moved the curtain out from the window so I could see out, because there was a long blind type curtain. It just basically prevented you from seeing outside. So I could not see anything, and I was unable to move to do this. Again, I was experiencing sleep paralysis. I could not move my arm to get to the window to look to see what was pecking on it. Now, I do know that it was not a tree because there was not a tree there at that time. Also, I know that it was at that point in time, it was a clear night. It wasn't storming. There was no wind, gust, or anything like that that could have caused this. So I have no clue what was causing the pecking on the window. I was, however, able to turn my eyes enough to look out the window that was on the right. Now, the thing about the window that was on my right, it had a two-piece curtain that in the center there was just enough gap that I could see out of it. Now, the scary thing about this is when I look out this window, it looks like there is someone there that just has their hands pressed up against the window looking in. Now, my nearest neighbors are probably a quarter of a mile or more away. So, why is this person looking in my window, and why am I not able to move? And then, even more terrifying is, what is this thing that's pecking on the window that I cannot see? Now, after maybe 30 minutes or, you know, maybe even long, maybe an hour, I'm not sure. I just remember fighting for a long period of time till I could actually get up and see what it was. I get up, I go to the window, I pull the curtains back, nothing. There's nothing staring in the window. I go to the window where the pecking was happening. It's now no longer happening. I pull the curtain back, nothing. So at this point, I don't know what's going on, but I am scared. I'm terrified. And at this point, I was in my 30s. This was just a couple of years ago. But after that, it did not happen anymore. That was it. After that summer, I did not experience this anymore. So now I will say that at the time, I was going through a very bad breakup. I was living alone for the first time in many years. It was just me and my dogs. And I don't know if that played a part in it. I don't know if the stress from this breakup was playing a part in that. But I just know that those are two things that happened around the same time that this started. But again, that's just my mind trying to rationalize why this thing that you cannot explain otherwise was happening. Why am I all of a sudden experiencing sleep paralysis when I never had it before? And what was those things outside my window? I just don't know, because they were gone when I was able to get up and actually look out the window. So I have no clue. But hey, if you guys have an idea of what it may have been, I mean, definitely leave a comment down below. I would love to hear it. Also, if you have any stories that you would like to share, I will leave a link to my email in the description. Feel free to email them to me. I'm really going to start researching some things. I'm really going to, start making this channel not only about the scarier side of the paranormal, but just the strange side, because we've all had that strange thing that's happened to us. I've just mentioned, four different things that happened, not only to me, but to my family. So we've all had those things that you just can't explain or you can't rationalize, even as an adult. So definitely, guys, if you have anything like that, I would definitely love to hear about them in the comments below. If you have an idea of what this may have been, let me know in the comments also. And if you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. It would be greatly appreciated. And I really look forward to just making more content and sharing it with you guys. And, just I'm going to enjoy just reading everything. But with that, guys, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this video, and you have a wonderful day, evening, night, wherever you are. Have a good one.